Welcome to the castle, everybody. This is Nightsaber Z42, and today we've got a very special video for you. This is the tier list for Star Wars role-playing game. So this past year, 2024, I have reviewed a lot of Star Wars RPG books, from the core rule books all the way to the source books and even the era books and all of the item and splat books and all of that. And today I'm actually going to rank them. I'm going to do a tier list video. So exactly who is this video for? Well, if you're a GM, then hopefully this will kind of give you an idea of what to look out for, what should be your top priority, and which ones should probably stay away from unless you're just completing your collection. For players, if you have a character that you're just really invested with, that you really enjoy playing as, then go ahead and pick up the source book for that character's career and see what else you can do with it. You're going to have signature abilities and things like that that you can play around with, but other than that, there's really not a whole lot for players in these source books. So I have 4 different tiers in this tier list. So we have the essential line, where these are the books that you're absolutely going to want to pick up if you're a GM. Then we have the top tier, where a lot of the content in that source book is going to really add to the game. Not quite essential, but close enough. The mid tier, it's going to add to the game, but there's also going to be some things that aren't as great in that source book, so we'll put it in the mid tier. And then for the low tier, there's just not a whole lot of value in that specific source book, unless you're looking for something very specific, like a specific specialization or something like that. Without further ado, let's go ahead and start this tier maker with the 3 source books that add or are a collection of allies and adversaries, gadgets and gears, and starships and speeders. So those 3 books right there: allies and adversaries, gadgets and gears, starships and speeders. Where would I put this? Well, because it is a collection of all of the various different things that you've gotten from these source books over the years, these 3 have to be essential. In that order, I would say if you're a new GM who's starting a campaign with your friends, I would say pick up allies and adversaries. Absolutely, that should be your first pick right there, followed closely by gadgets and gears, because those 2, you're going to get pretty much everything that's been published in these source books. You're going to have a lot of different NPCs to play around with, some that are just minions and rivals, but you're also going to have like named characters like Lando Calrissian, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Yoda. Those are going to be statted out in this book. Then we have gadgets and gears, and this is going to be a collection of all of the various items that you'll ever need in this role-playing game. So it's pretty much like an equipment book, and I would say that's absolutely necessary if you're a new GM to the game. Starships and Speeders is an essential book, but I would say it's even less so because you're not really going to be using Starships and Speeders unless you have a campaign that's like very specific to ship combat. If you have a ship combat heavy campaign, then yes, I would rank this one a little bit higher than the others, but for the most part, you're going to give your players a ship and they're going to stick with that ship for a long time. Now, if they want to upgrade, then yeah, this book will be valuable. Or if you know that they're going to be getting into some space combat or things like that, then yeah, this book will also have a lot of value. What about the 3 era source books? We have Rise of the Separatist, Collapse of the Republic, and Dawn of Rebellion. Oh boy, okay. I am not a big fan of these source books at all. There's very little there. I mean, there's a lot of lore stuff there, but then again, you could just go to the Wikipedia for all of that information. For Rise of the Separatists and Collapse of the Republic, you actually do have a little bit more value because you're going to have adversaries from that era that are statted, like Count Dooku, General Grievous, but even more so, you're going to have a lot of the droids that are statted out. And that's where I think the value for this book, these 2 books are. So if you plan on playing in the Clone Wars era, depending on which side you're doing, if you're doing an early clone campaign, then Rise of the Separatists, but if you're at the late stage of that, then Collapse of the Republic, I would say those might be valuable if you plan on playing in that era. Low tier for both. And Dawn of the Rebellion, I absolutely don't find any value of this book because, let's be honest, the way that the core rulebooks are written, they're expecting you to play in the Galactic Civil War, which is kind of where Dawn of Rebellion is taking place. If you really like Star Wars Rebels and you want to incorporate those characters, then yeah, you could pick this book up, but this is the lowest of the low tier. I don't think you could really sink any lower. Actually, there is a source book, which we'll find out later on, that could possibly go lower. But other than that, there really isn't anything in this book, and I would say absolutely skip this one unless you're trying to complete your collection. Next, we have Dangerous Covenants. Okay, if I remember correctly, this one has some pretty awesome specializations. There's tons of new weapons and gear, and more importantly, we have explosions. Yes, so we have bomb making and things like that in this source book. This is a very combat focused book, but it still has some universal value to it. If you have a character that is a more combat heavy focused character, then yeah, this book is gonna be for those types of people, especially with the new weapons and gear. This one is going to be top tier. Desperate Allies. Okay, so what did this one bring to the table? We got base building rules, and they're kind of cool and can be used in many situations, but you actually have to use it or remember to use them. It had some interesting specializations, and this one had a session breaking signature ability. So GMs, if any of your players pick up diplomatic solutions, you might want to start planning around that. This allows a player to basically just say, okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and skip this social encounter, and now they're on my side, or something like that. There's actually quite a lot of weapons and gears for a book about diplomats, and I actually really applauded this book because of that. It was really interesting. For a socially minded career, there's a lot of weapons in this book. So this one is actually going to be mid-tier. Disciples of Harmony. Well, the specializations are good for pacifist type characters, and I know that's not everybody's thing, but for those who really play around with, you know, a Jedi who doesn't try to hurt other people, this is perfect for them. There's lots of stun weapons here, which is actually really good because I know there's going to be lots of times where you're going to want to keep your adversaries alive, maybe for questioning or things like that, and there's a lot of options here. The new force powers are okay. One of them, though, is a lesser version of battle meditation, and so I would say just stick with battle meditation. It's much better. This one is going to go to mid-tier for me. Enter the Unknown is next, and I really didn't have a whole lot to say about this one, or at least good things. There are some okay specializations within this book, with the exception of the driver. I just wasn't feeling the driver. It's pretty much like a pilot, only less or so, but also at the same time, it's in the Edge of the Empire line. Like, I think the pilot career or the pilot specializations are a lot better in Age of Rebellion, but if you don't have access, or if you didn't have access to those books, then this is kind of what you got with Edge of the Empire. There is a game-breaking signature ability with Sudden Discovery. This basically says, hey, I found this thing that I'm looking for, or this planet that I'm looking for, so we're just gonna go straight there. So yeah, if you are a GM and one of your players has picked up that signature ability, then yeah, start preparing for stuff like that. So I also have to group this one with Far Horizons, because both of these books are about exploration. It's a niche and underutilized aspect of the Star Wars universe, and for that reason, this one is going to go low tier. So let's talk about Far Horizons real quick. The concept of colonization is very niche, just like with exploration, I feel like. The homestead and business upgrades are interesting if your campaign is geared towards that sort of thing. And the mechanics for specialized roles can also be interesting if you have anybody that fits the role. So there really isn't a whole lot of things that I would say are universally useful in this book, and that for that reason it's also going to go at low tier. So these two books are quite similar in their themes. One's about exploration, the other one's about colonization, and they just don't really do it for me. Like, I don't really ever see a reason to pick either of these careers unless you're playing in a campaign that's heavily geared towards that. Maybe like really early on in the High Republic, or maybe you're pulling off a Mass Effect Andromeda situation like I tried to do a couple years ago. Then maybe you might have some value for these books. Endless Vigil. Okay, let's see. Lightsaber crafting, top tier already. Just for that alone. It's literally, lightsaber crafting has come up in each of my campaigns. In fact, I got a player who's wanting a second lightsaber and he is getting ready to build it. So yeah, lightsaber crafting is going to be useful if you have any force sensitive characters in your campaign. But not only that, the mechanics for urban settings are actually really useful because, let's be honest, you're gonna be on a planet with a city most of the time, unless you're playing as one of these exploration or colonization heavy campaigns. The Razor specialization is kind of where it fell flat for me. Like, really, why did we need the Racer specialization? Actually, I know why they included it. It's because of pod racing. But still, pod racing, where are the rules at? There actually aren't any rules for, racing your pod racer. My advice to you, if you are going to be doing pod racing stuff like that, every once in a while, I would say pick up the Jewel of Yavin adventure book, because there is a nice section where the players are racing cloud cars. So you could take that concept and then implement it as your pod racing adventure or race or something like that. So anyways, Endless Vigil, lightsaber crafting, top tier. It's gotta be. Fly casual. Alright, astrogation rules, or at least the ones that are in this source book, are only useful if time is a factor, and I personally tend to skip over that stuff. Like, I'll just say, okay, you got a little bit of downtime, what are you guys gonna do as we're traveling to another system, stuff like that. So if time is a factor, then yeah, you're gonna be using those astrogation rules. Showdowns can be cool every once in a while, but yeah, it's just something to elevate that specific career for a little bit. We do have some interesting gambling rules though, and you know it's gonna happen at some point. As soon as you touch down on a dock, they're gonna go right to that tavern or saloon or whatever, and they're gonna spot some little corner where some people are gambling, and somebody's gonna be like, okay, I want to join and get some credits and join the gambling. So yeah, even though it's not Sabak, the gambling rules here are actually fine. They're there for a reason, and they're there to, occupy your players. That's pretty much it, and it does a pretty good job of it. So fly casual, this one's gonna go mid-tier for me. Forged in battle. So we have some interesting specializations here, although nothing too fancy. We have some new weapons and some new gear. So this would kind of be like the Dangerous Covenants book, only for the Age of Rebellion line. So we do get lots of new stuff here. We also have fortifications, which are like bases, and they're very circumstantial, but it can also elevate an encounter if you remember to use it. Now, I remember in my video, I put this one at low tier, and I'm gonna bump this one up to mid tier. Because, yeah, fortifications, they can actually really elevate an encounter. You just have to remember to remind your players about it and utilize it. Plus, there's new weapons and new gear, so it does have some stuff going for it, and it doesn't seem like a low tier kind of a book. Keeping the Peace. I actually really didn't have a whole lot to say about this book in my review, but it's gonna be top tier because of armor crafting. Plus, the Guardian career is just a staple, and it's a really good career. And so having new specializations to add to that makes it even better. So armor crafting is pretty much the reason why I would put this at top tier, but also because the Guardian career is really good. So top tier, Keeping the Peace. Fully operational. All right, let's go. Mechanics skill expansion. There's a lot of things you can do with mechanics now, and this book really brings that to light. So any of you engineer type characters are really gonna have fun with the new mechanics from this book. Also, you get to turn civilian vehicles and buildings into military powerhouses. Awesome. And the most important part, the part that surprised me when I reread this book for the review, vehicle crafting. Like if you have a shipbuilder type player or character, then being able to craft your own vehicle is probably going to be the highlight of the campaign for them. And everything else in this book, by the way, just elevates the mechanic career and gives them just more things to do. And there's probably not a whole lot of things that they are going to do base game, but this book really makes that career viable and actually decent and good. So fully operational, we're putting that one in top tier. Knights of Fate. There's some interesting specializations. I can give them that. But the GM Toolkit chapter really had nothing. Like, to me, it felt like they were struggling for ideas with this specific book. And yeah, I guess you could say it's pretty much like the fighter class in Dungeons and Dragons. This is the warrior career for Force and Destiny, and it's just uninteresting. There wasn't anything beneficial added to this book aside from the specializations. And in my video, I put this at mid tier. No, we're bumping this one down to low tier because this is as low as you can go. Like, out of the two books in this entire tier list, Dawn of Rebellion and Knights of Fate are going to be the two lowest of the low tiers. Lead by example. I believe this would be the first instance that we have mass combat rules, and that can be useful if you're in a situation that utilizes it, and that's the key thing. The commander career is already an awkward career for me, and this book doesn't really add anything to change that. So yeah, you have somebody who's pretending to be the boss of everyone, but not really, because, you know, this is a team-based game and they're kind of like a pseudo-social career mixed with some combat stuff. And yeah, it's a really weird one, and the book doesn't really add anything for it. So lead by example is going in the low tier. No disintegrations. Okay, so the specializations just didn't cut it for me. They just didn't seem bounty hunter-like. And, you know, in a book about bounty hunters, yeah, your specialization should really be geared towards that. And I just didn't get that feeling with the new specializations. The bounties table are rather useful, but only for bounty hunters. And yeah, that I know that's kind of really funny for me to say, but yeah, I really don't see any other type of a character being able to use that table. This is, I would say that's a table that you would use for a bounty hunter who has some downtime and everybody else is doing their own thing, so you might as well just make some extra credits on the side. That type of a thing. There are some interesting weapons and gear and vehicles in this book, but that's kind of about it, and for that reason, it's gonna go to mid-tier for me. Savage Spirits. So we got cool beast riding rules, but it is niche. You really have to go out of your way to include it in a campaign for that specific player that wanted to be a ranger. So if you like rangers from D&D, then you're gonna like this career. That's pretty much what I say. Animal companions, they kind of needed to be more fleshed out, specifically in regards to taming. Like, there were no rules for taming an animal companion in this book, at least not that I remember. So I kind of really wish that was fleshed out a little bit more, and they could have put that in this book, but they really didn't. And so for that reason, this is going to go down to mid-tier. Special modification. Oh yes, here we go. Lots and lots of crafting rules, weapons and armor, and let's not even forget the droids. And my gosh, the number of times somebody has wanted to build a droid in my campaigns. Each and every one of my campaigns, by the way. Somebody always wants to build a droid from scratch. Yeah. Then we have the slicing rules. So yeah, your slicers are now actively engaged as somebody else is slicing against them or protecting whatever it is that they're trying to slice into. And nobody can help them because they're the only ones slicing into that system. So yeah, that's really gonna make that player feel extra special. Everything in this book, by the way, is universally useful. Any career, any type of person can make use of the rules in this book. whether it's the crafting or the slicing or any of the gear and the items and things like that. It's all going to be useful. This is top tier, but make no mistake about it. If you're a GM who has all three of these essential books, this would be my top pick. This is like borderline top tier essential right here. Special modifications. Stay on target. The pilot book. Okay, this is really only useful for pilots, kinda. Beast riding is cool, but you really have to go out of your way to include it into your campaign. And let's be honest, you're probably not going to use that a whole lot. Including astromechs is a plus, but it isn't totally necessary. It just gives those astromech NPCs something to do while they're on a ship. The best thing about this book, though, is the dogfighting terrain. So we have asteroid field and debris fields, we have nebulas, and large space battles. These really add some interesting mechanics to space battles. So if you end up in a space battle or creating one from scratch, I would say include one of these different terrains just to add a little bit of extra spice. Your players will certainly remember it. So stay on target. In the video review, I put this one at low tier, but after some consideration, especially with the dogfighting terrain, I'm gonna bump this one up to mid tier. Unlimited power. Okay, so this is the dark side book. We do get some alchemy crafting. It's okay, but it's very niche. I would say this is great for weird characters, and by weird I mean like supernaturally attuned characters. This book is great for dark side users, and there's actually lots of great advice for GMs regarding dark side users. This one, unlimited power, because it's really great for dark side users, and let's be honest, none of these books are even remotely touching upon that theme, it's gonna go mid tier. Ciphers and Masks, quite honestly, my favorite source book of all. So there's lots of upgrades to skills. So we got computers, deception, skullduggery, and for sure stealth. Hopefully I got all those right. So you get lots of different upgrades, different uses for those skills. We also have some slicing encounters, but also hiding weapons, and this is highly underutilized, or at least for me. I always forget to have my characters or my players hide their weapons, especially on a civilized planet like Coruscant. Your player character should not be walking around with their big heavy sniper rifles and whatnot, unless it's like a boondock planet. So yeah, I gotta remember to implement those rules in my campaigns. But everything in this book, just like with special modifications, is universally useful. Like all of the upgrades to skills, the slicing encounters, hiding weapons. That's not just specific to the career. That's something that anybody can use. And for that reason, it's gonna be top tier. So there we go. That is my tier list for the Star Wars role-playing game line, the source books, the era books, the item collection books, whatever you call those three books. I honestly have no idea what you would call those. So our three essential books in the order that I would recommend them: Allies and Adversaries, Gadgets and Gears, Starships and Speeders. And then we have our top tier, but make no mistake, I would definitely say that two of those books are borderline essential, and those two are Special Modifications and Ciphers and Masks. And then, of course, we have Dangerous Covenants, Endless Vigil, Keeping the Peace, and Fully Operational. All solid picks if you're looking to expand your collection. And then in the mid-tier, we have Desperate Allies, Disciples of Harmony, Fly Casual, Forged in Battle, No Disintegrations, Savage Spirits, Stay on Target, and Unlimited Power. Only really because these books, I would say, are very specific to that career. It fills a very niche void in the Star Wars universe, or at least in this role-playing game. And then, of course, in the low tier, we have the three era books, which I really would only recommend picking up if you're finishing your collection or if you plan on playing within that era. And really only Rise of the Separatists and Collapse of the Republic are really beneficial. Dawn of Rebellion, just go ahead and burn that. There's really no reason why that should even exist. And Knights of Fate, I would say they could have done a better job with that. Enter the Unknown and Far Horizons, there's some value there at least, but it's very, very specific to if you're playing a campaign that is about exploration or is about colonization. So otherwise, you could skip those two. and then lead by example. A very awkward career, in my opinion, that just doesn't get better with this source book. And so that is my tier list, and hopefully this helps you out in starting your collection. I will address a hot topic, I guess, on where I found these books in my collection, and I would say I was actually very fortunate to have started my collection before Fantasy Flight gave the Star Wars line to Edge Studios. So all of my books are actually Fantasy Flight. I think I might have 1 or 2 Edge Studio books, but I was also really lucky to have gotten those on the reprints. The reprints happened a couple years ago, and you're not really going to find these unless you find them out in the wild. And so if you do see them out in the wild, I would say pick them up if you are playing this game. If not, you're going to have to resort to eBay. Of course, there are ways of finding the information online. In fact, you can check the description of this video for my favorite ones. So yeah, sorry, that's kind of my answer for that. And I wish it was better, but this game is quite old and I don't really see this ever coming back with new content. That's gonna do it for this video. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Give this video a huge thumbs up to support the series, and I will see you guys in the next video.